After my mother passed away, my sister-in-law and mother-in-law started visiting every time I was alone at home. It was strange how they would come over and act like it was my duty to entertain them, even though they had made the effort to visit. Their presence felt like an imposition, and I ended up ordering delivery because they expected me to cover the cost. My sister-in-law would laugh loudly, as if finding amusement in the situation. This painful routine had been ongoing for 2 years. With my son and daughter away at university, it was just my husband and me at home. One day, Tony told me something shocking. His parents and sister's family would be moving in next week. He even suggested that I should move out because I was in the way. This was my house, and I had no intention of leaving. Determined to take action, I agreed to tidy up, but had already started making plans. Tony, unaware of my intentions, left for a business trip. I quickly set my plan into motion and had everything prepared before his return. I looked forward to seeing the surprise on Tony's face when he came back. My name is Nikki. I'm 48 years old and live as a housewife in my family home in the countryside. After high school, I moved to New York for university and stayed to work and live a single life. During a visit home, I attended a matchmaking event for local revitalization, despite having no intention of returning to the countryside. The locals persuaded me, and my reluctance led me to attend. Among the men there, one quietly sat beside me, Tony, my now husband. Feeling awkward alone, I struck up a conversation with him. Despite his few words, his sincerity attracted me. At that time, I was single and not in a high position at my company. My father had passed away, and I had no siblings. My mother lived alone. Growing tired of life in New York, I started considering that returning to the countryside and getting married might not be a bad idea. Eventually, I married Tony and moved back to the countryside to live in my parents' home. Tony agreed to live with my mother, as his sister Sarah was already living with her husband in his parents' home. We had a son and a daughter, and our married life seemed smooth. However, after my mother's death and the children leaving for university, I faced unexpected difficulties. Tony, a man of few words, had always kept to himself and stayed uninvolved in parenting. I had been close to my mother, and her support had made parenting manageable. But after she passed away, I was left with just Tony, and our life took a turn for the worse. Tony's behavior changed drastically. He started referring to me as you or hey instead of using my name and began acting arrogantly, a stark contrast to his former quiet demeanor. He would lounge around in the living room, making demands like, "If you're not doing anything, at least make some coffee." His new attitude made me feel like a fool. He never used to lie down outside the bedroom, but now he seemed to disregard all the respect we once had. I can't help but wonder what triggered such a drastic change in Tony. Perhaps he had been considerate of my mother because she was his mother-in-law, but his current arrogant and dismissive attitude is something I've never seen before. It seems like he's spreading his wings now that she's no longer here, but this transformation has been startling. Even our children, who visit occasionally, have been taken aback by his new behavior. When the kids come home, Tony is so engrossed in the TV that he doesn't even move from the living room. If they try to change the channel, he snaps at them, "Hey, what are you doing? Go away." His harsh demeanor clearly upsets them. Given that our home was usually just me and my mother, it's uncomfortable for them to see their father acting so rudely. As a result, they stopped coming home as frequently, except for the Christmas holidays. Finally, I reached my limit and gently asked him, "Hey, what's going on with you lately? You used to be so calm." Tony's response was sharp and defensive. "What do you mean? What's gotten into me? You seem to always be on edge since around the time Mom passed away. I was considerate because she was your mother, but now that she's gone, I'm the head of this house. It's normal to get angry if something displeases me," he grumbled, his face more intimidating than I'd ever seen. I involuntarily took a step back. It's clear that the stress of accommodating my mother was a factor, but I never expected Tony to change so dramatically. Since then, I've had to be extremely cautious around him. My life has been challenging since my mother's death. I work part-time until 3 p.m. and then handle household chores when I get home. Where we used to enjoy our time together, now it feels incredibly gloomy. When I walk in, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law are always waiting at the entrance. "Oh, Nikki, you're quite late," they'd say. "We've been waiting outside in the cold for 30 minutes. I heard you finish work at 3 o'clock, so we came over at that time. Why are you so late?" They knew my part-time job ends at 3 o'clock, and that I come home around this time every day. My husband's parents and his sister's family all live together. Sarah, my sister-in-law, changed her last name to Timpson when she married, but she and her husband live with her parents. Sarah, who has no children and has never worked, was close to my mother-in-law when my mother was alive. I once thought they were kind, but their attitude shifted drastically after my mother passed away. "I'm sorry I'm late. I was out shopping," I said. I didn't dare show any irritation, fearing more criticism. In this situation, I always have to invite them into my home as soon as I arrive, then organize my shopping and change clothes. But my mother-in-law immediately starts complaining. "Your husband's mother and sister went out of their way to come here, and you're not doing anything for us. That's just crazy. I guess we have no choice but to order delivery. You'll pay for it, right?" Sarah laughed loudly, finding something amusing in the situation. As always, I ended up paying. This ongoing discomfort has lasted for 2 years. I've even talked to my husband about it, but he never helps. Mom and Sarah are just trying to be nice because they think you're still upset about losing your mom. "It's not good to complain," he said. "But I'm always the one footing the bill for their deliveries, which puts us in the red every month. You could manage our finances better or find a higher-paying part-time job. Besides, you seem to care about your own family but are cold towards mine." His words left me stunned. I don't want to quit my current part-time job because my coworkers are nice, and although I live in my parents' house, I've never neglected my in-laws. I've attended family gatherings and brought gifts for birthdays and anniversaries. They used to be kind to me, so why did their attitude change so suddenly after my mother's death? I felt overwhelmed and stressed, unsure how to handle the situation. Then, one night after returning from work, my husband dropped a bombshell. "Next week, my parents and sister's family are moving in, so clear out your room," he said abruptly. "What? That's so sudden." I was confused and panicked. "They're moving in this Saturday. Get ready quickly," he added, dismissing my distress. With only 3 days left, this major decision had been made without any consultation with me, just decided by him and his family. "Wait a minute, you can't just make such an important decision on your own. This is my house," I protested. "Shut up. I've decided because I'm the head of this house now. Don't complain," he snapped, leaving me stunned. I accidentally dropped a dish I was washing, and it shattered. "You're really clumsy. That's why it's such a hassle to be with you," he said coldly, catching me off guard. He added sarcastically, "Let me be clear. My mom and sister like this house and want to live here, but they don't like you. I don't want to be with you either, so you should leave." "Yeah, so like I said, pack up all your stuff. I'll be on a business trip for the next 3 days, so finish it before then," he ordered, his treatment filled with anger. I resolved to take immediate action. "Fine, I'll pack everything up," I said, my resolve hardening. Tony smirked. "Clearly pleased. I thought you'd resist more, but you're surprisingly obedient," he said, seeming satisfied that his plan was going smoothly. Little did he know, I had my own plans for payback. The next day, while my husband was away on his business trip, I followed through with my plan. I made the necessary phone calls and completed all the preparations. I left the house before Tony could return, imagining his surprise when he came back. My destination was my daughter Lily's apartment in New York, where she lives alone. I had informed her 3 nights ago. "Mom, I've been waiting. Are you done with the procedures?" Lily asked. "Yes, everything is perfect. Sorry for coming over so suddenly," I replied. I hugged Lily and reassured her, "It's okay. Besides, Dad's way of doing things is terrible, trying to kick you out of the house like that." She smiled and replied, "Well, before I came here, I got back at him. He's going to be surprised later." We both laughed. My visit to Lily's was part of a plan. Later that night, as expected, Tony called, his voice full of frustration. "What kind of joke is this? There's nothing in the house. Where did all the furniture and appliances go?" I calmly responded, "I meant to clear out everything from your room, not the entire house." Tony's confusion was evident. "Initially, I told you to clear out your room, but now you've removed all my belongings," he said, his frustration growing. I replied, "You wanted me to leave, right? So I got rid of all the furniture and appliances I inherited from my mother. Now your family can move in without any hesitation." I explained that I had arranged for a recycling company to take away the furniture and appliances and had movers transport our children's belongings and my own to Lily's apartment. Though it was a hassle for Lily, she was eager to help me get back at him. After a moment of stunned silence, Tony spoke again, his tone now confused. Actually, the story about my parents' and sister's family moving in was a lie. Both my mother and sister are on the verge of divorce. They were planning to take refuge at your place. Oh, really? I said, my tone indifferent. You didn't think I'd know about their situation? Tony sounded a bit upset. You already knew. Of course, I said calmly. Over the past few days, I had been in touch with my father-in-law and my brother-in-law, Robert, so I was fully aware of the turmoil in Tony's family. Robert, originally from New York, had attended a matchmaking event in my hometown. I had also participated in the matchmaking event where Robert, who had shown interest in Sarah, was smitten by her. Under strong persuasion from Sarah's mother, Robert ended up marrying her. Unfortunately, after their marriage, Sarah and her mother became increasingly selfish. Sarah was pampered by my mother-in-law, causing Robert a lot of trouble, especially since they began coming to my house every day. Sarah stopped preparing dinner, relying on us for meals. This situation continued for 2 years until my father-in-law, fed up with the situation, ordered my mother-in-law and Sarah to leave their house. When Robert informed me of this, I felt a sense of relief. However, when Tony learned that his mother and Sarah were about to be evicted, he decided to invite them to our home. While Tony claimed he was on a business trip, he was actually pleading with his father to forgive his mother and sister. Since his father refused, Tony reluctantly helped them pack their belongings. They planned to move to our house with only the bare minimum of their possessions, which meant we would have to manage without furniture or appliances. When I shared this with Tony, I heard a voice on the other end of the phone saying, "Well, that's a cunning wife." It turned out my mother-in-law had been eavesdropping on our conversation. "Nikki, what should we do? How are we supposed to live in a house with nothing?" she asked, sounding distressed. "And it's terrible of you to contact my husband without permission," Sarah added, clearly upset. I responded, "Actually, I also asked your husband for help. I requested that he forgive the two of you. He said if you reflect properly, you can come back tomorrow." Sarah and my mother-in-law seemed to cheer up as if imagining a happy reunion. "Nikki, let's forget about what happened earlier. You're not so bad after all," they said, trying to make amends. Tony, who had brought the two women home, looked visibly disappointed. "So the issue with them is resolved. But what about me? At least return our home appliances," I said. "Oh, about that," I continued. "While I was cleaning up, I also arranged to sell the house. So could you please move out soon?" "What? Wait a minute," Tony exclaimed, shocked. "I'm your husband. How can you treat me like this?" I calmly replied, "You tried to kick me out of the house, so I don't see why you think this is unfair. Your actions were pretty terrible too." Tony was left speechless, unable to counter my argument. I added, "Oh, and your belongings are still in the house. Check the small drawer in the bedroom. I've already completed my part, so make sure you handle yours." I could hear Tony's footsteps on the other end of the phone, moving towards the bedroom. After a door slammed shut, he said, "What? These are copies of the petition for divorce and the summons?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Please fill out your part and submit the response to the court." Tony's disbelief was palpable. "This is a joke. Why do I have to get divorced? You said you wanted me to leave. Isn't that the same as breaking up?" He was clearly shocked by how his actions had backfired. Silence followed, and soon I heard Tony's sobs. In a tearful voice, he pleaded, "Please, I was wrong. I will cherish you from now on. Can't we start over? Please believe me." Despite his desperate pleas, I couldn't overlook his actions, prioritizing his family over me and trying to force me out of the house. I was willing to accept his mother and Sarah, but he should have at least discussed it with me. How could I trust a husband who so easily chose his mother and sister over his wife? His apology did nothing to change my mind. The next morning, I received a call from Sarah. "Nikki, you tricked me. When I got home, neither my father nor Robert were there, and the house has already been sold." I responded calmly, "I didn't lie to you. I said you could return. But I never mentioned that your father and husband would be there waiting." Sarah and her mother complained bitterly over the phone. Then suddenly, her mother exclaimed, "How could this be?" I guess they had discovered the envelope in the mailbox, which contained a letter from my father-in-law. The letter included the filled-out petition for divorce and the summons. From what I had heard, my father-in-law had been fed up with his wife's selfish behavior and had considered moving to a care home alone. This incident pushed him to finally sell the house. Robert, unable to tolerate Sarah's selfishness, decided to divorce her and return to his parents in Enmai. Do something, Nikki, or we'll lose our house. Sarah pleaded. That's not my problem, I replied. Why don't you apologize to your husband? It might not be too late. Sarah's pride, however, prevented her from apologizing. I could hear her sobbing while her mother tried to console her. Then her mother, apparently grabbing the phone, yelled, "You wicked woman! How could you be so cruel?" Surprised by her sudden outburst, I suspected it was just a bluff. I calmly said my final words, "Understood. Take care, mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Goodbye." I heard a voice from the other end saying, "Wait," but I ignored it and ended the call. I had no intention of dealing with any more of their trouble. Despite their selfish actions leading to this situation, they continued to blame me. Soon, I would be finalizing my divorce from Tony, making them practically strangers to me. I saw no need to involve myself with them any longer. Since Tony was unwilling to initiate the divorce, I had to take legal action. After a lengthy mediation process, we were finally able to proceed with the divorce. Tony requested half of the proceeds from the sale of our house, but his demand was denied as it was not considered shared property. Tony confronted me angrily after the trial, but the judge intervened. I watched as Tony's disappointment grew, feeling no sympathy. If only he had shown any remorse for the constant interference from his mother and Sarah, things might have been different. Ultimately, our marriage ended on the worst possible note. After the divorce, it seemed Tony, along with his divorced mother and Sarah, were struggling to find a place to live. A local friend informed me that they were initially sleeping in the park, using cardboard boxes. Tony reached out for help but eventually fell out of contact, possibly due to his phone service being cut off. Over time, they managed to move into a rundown flat on the outskirts of town. Tony was working to support them, but it was a burden, particularly with his inexperienced mother and Sarah. Despite being of working age, Sarah refused to get a job, likely due to her pride. The constant arguments between his mother and Sarah were disturbing the neighbors. Tony, frustrated by the situation, had turned to gambling, which seemed to be draining most of his earnings. Though it was no longer my concern, I couldn't help feeling a sense of satisfaction hearing about their troubles. As for me, I'm starting a new chapter in New York. Just before the divorce, I had consulted with Robert, who had already divorced Sarah and returned to NY, about my future. Through his connections, I secured a position at a food-related company run by Robert's brother. Initially, I stayed with my daughter, but with Robert's help, I found a new apartment and now live independently in a small flat. I'm deeply grateful for all the support from Robert. We share similar painful experiences and have found common ground, which has brought us closer. Perhaps our meeting at that matchmaking event was fate. Although I now live far from my hometown, I always keep it in my heart. I had been secretly concerned that marriages would become less common and that the local population would decline. However, it seems that young people are increasingly using dating apps, making matchmaking events less necessary. Reports suggest that remote work and lower-cost housing are drawing more young people back to rural areas, including my hometown. I'm pleased to see my hometown thriving. I also think about returning someday for a peaceful retirement, possibly with Robert, whom I've recently started dating with the possibility of remarriage in mind.